Okay, why don't we get to the Democrats?
Okay, so the big race on the Democratic side, another sort of war between the establishment and progressive wings of the party, is Henry Cuellar, sitting incumbent. Really, you have to call him sort of a conservative Democrat, maybe the most conservative Democrat remaining in the House, versus progressive Jessica Cisneros. This is her second time taking him on. She's made it very close every single time. And this one, still, this race has not been called. The very latest, per Steve Kornacki, is that Cuellar leads by 177 votes. That's it. There's still, he says, a very small number of provisional ballots to be counted, and there are several counties that could still have a few uncounted votes, and a recount certainly looms. So NBC is not yet calling the race. What is extraordinary here, Saagar, is if you look at the map of this district goes from San Antonio down to the border.
Yep.
And it was very divided in terms of the vote. Overwhelmingly, those border counties, which is Cuellar's base, went for Cuellar. Overwhelmingly, the more northern parts of the district that are close to San Antonio went for Cisneros. And those margins hardened from the original primary and from this runoff, which raises the question of whether potentially Roe versus Wade and the question of abortion rights sort of hardened and furthered the divides in this district.
That's interesting.
But it is very interesting. Now, Cuellar, for those of you guys who don't know, not only is he pro-life, he supports, he's opposed to Roe versus Wade, so he's culturally conservative on that issue. He also is the only Democrat in the House to vote against the PRO Act. So he's also anti-union. He's very close to big oil. He gets a lot of donations from the oil and gas industry, which is kind of like, given where his district is, that makes sense. He also, his office and his home was raided by the FBI, seemingly for some very questionable dealings with Azerbaijan.
Yeah, it was Azerbaijan.
Yeah, he and his wife both. She has some businesses.
Yeah.
He's been the leader of the Friends of Azerbaijan caucus.
As one does.
Anyway, and the FBI has said they're not going to clear him before Election Day. So that also was looming over this. Now, there was a lot of big money that came in for Cuellar from the places that we have been seeing big money come in to try to crush progressive candidates, in particular DMFI, Democrat Majority for Israel, and what appears to be a sort of aligned super PAC backed by billionaire Reid Hoffman called the Mainstream Democrats that came in big for him in the final weeks. And if indeed this less than 200 vote margin holds, that may have ultimately been the difference. Now, I do want to say, Saagar, the other thing that's interesting here is unions also despised Cuellar. CWA in particular has a beef with him. And so there was also union money that came in on the side of Cisneros. So she did have some backup in terms of independent expenditures in this thing, but it is as close as it possibly could be. Right now, it looks like Cuellar is going to be able to narrowly hold on, but pretty extraordinary dynamics here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this part of Texas, I love this part of Texas. Again, so much history. It really is kind of the last vestiges of the frontier West in terms of how it works down there and, in terms of the history. So just to give people context, some of the counties here that we talked a lot about back in 2020, Zapata County and Starr County, these are those South Texas border towns, which either went for Trump in the case of one of them or came within 5 points. So Joe Biden only won Starr County by about 5 points over Donald Trump, even though Hillary won that by 58 points. So bit of a swing in terms of how it worked down there. These are places where there really is kind of an emerging GOP-ish coalition with a lot of these voters. And I'm looking at the map, and it makes total sense the way that you broke it down, which is that the Texas border counties came in for Cuellar at 70% of the vote. I mean, talking, Starr County, 80% Cuellar. Zapata, 88% Cuellar. Jim Hogg County, 78%. Jim Webb County, 70%. Duval County, 68%. But then those surrounding more urban areas around San Antonio came in equally hard for Cisneros. The one nearest, Guadalupe County, at 91%. Bexar at 85%. Atasca at 67, and McClellan at 52. That was a little bit more of a split. But that just shows you just how different the dynamics are, even though, and this is what I do love about Texas, this is a majority Hispanic district. Most of these people are Hispanic, but Culturally, if you live near the city, you're more likely to be liberal. Culturally, if you live down on the border town, you're more of a vaquero Texas mindset. So the type of cultural difference between these two distinct Texans, disproportionately likely to be Hispanic, is just on display in the same way that it's on display across the entire country. And it just splits so hard. I think that's the crazy part.
It really is pretty fascinating. I think also for Cuellar, he's just got very deep roots in those
been there forever.
border communities. Yeah. And so I think, you know, that certainly bolsters him in that area. I was talking to our friend Colin Rogero, who's done a lot of work in that region and is one of the better Latino strategists on the Democratic side and was actually doing some of the union IEs in this particular race. And I was asking him, you know, kind of tell me about the typical voter in these border counties. And he said they do tend to be obviously more culturally conservative, but that's not necessarily, like abortion isn't necessarily the voting issue. Right. But he said, you know, they both are sort of pro-worker rights and pro-labor, but also very business-oriented, very entrepreneurial. So it's just a different cultural dynamic than you're going to find in almost any other part of the country. And then to see the divide in this district so clearly, and that's why, you know, that's why it's so hard to say definitively what's going to happen here also, because if there's another little pocket of voters in the San Antonio suburbs,
then she wins.
Then she wins. If the remaining pocket of voters is down in Zapata County or Starr County, that's going to go overwhelmingly for Cuellar, and then he's going to have a more clear victory on his hands. So that's why this one is still too close to call here ultimately. But, you know, this is also, Cuellar looks like he's going to pull it off, but it is embarrassing for the Democratic establishment that they go all in with this dude, Nancy Pelosi and Clyburn, and they can barely, I mean, their endorsement just counts for less than nothing. Yeah. Biden stayed out of this race, even though he's endorsed out there, like he endorsed Kurt Schrader. My guess is because Biden's approval rating is so dismal in the region that it probably wouldn't really help Cuellar. It might not really be a benefit to him. He may have said, just like, I got this. Why don't you just go do your thing in Washington? I'm not sure it would have ultimately been useful, but definitely a fascinating race here on this one. Oh, yeah,
absolutely. I can't wait to see more of it. I really do love this part of the country, and it's fun to see it all play out.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.